26 and beyond. My name is Don Osborn. I'm one of the co-founders and board members of NAMA, and together with my colleagues, Joni Kindwall-Moore and Gary Wietgrefe, we're going to discuss different aspects of the year that we've just seen, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A from our audience. I'm going to shift into a share mode here. There we go. So we're here to discuss the year that's we're about to conclude with regard to millets, and I've got a few overview items to cover before I pass it on to my colleagues, Gary and then Joni, in that order. So NAMA has been active since 2022, well, gearing up for the International Year of Millets, first of all, and then following up on what we were able to do then, which included some webinars with the University of Missouri. And then we've been doing various activities that we'll cover today. And then we'll look at the general situation of millets in North America with a background of what's happening internationally. So regarding webinars, we resumed webinars this year and produced 6 that covered the main grains that are called millets and sorghum, which I'll discuss in a moment. And we also had a very nice collaboration with an Indian organization called AgroSpectrum India on a webinar in August, which also included South America, some perspectives, particularly from Brazil. And I want to thank all the various collaborators and presenters we had during this process. This is really a chance to share their work and to learn from it. And we hope to do more of that in the coming year. So I wanted to start with an overview of what actually we're talking about millets in North America. There's sometimes confusion, lack of information. The names are funny or sometimes a little not very helpful in terms of understanding what's going on. But we, and particularly I brought up this Millets Triangle, which is kind of complicated, but it has an internal organization that I won't go into now. But this is a way of illustrating what out of all the millets we actually grow for what. And then there's a whole lot of them that are imported on smaller scales for food. Most of what we grow here is for forage, cover crops, and also wildlife. And that acreage is quite a bit larger, it seems, than what you might otherwise think of. So millets collectively are a pretty big part of agriculture, even in the United States and Canada, also Mexico, but not that big yet in the food space. So this is I will go through these fairly quickly. If you want, I can bring it back up during Q&A, and of course, people listening to the recording can stop and study this at their leisure. This is a focus on North America, crop by crop. As you'll see later on, that sorghum is a question I'll come to in a second, but the Proso-Pearl, Foxtail, Japanese, and teff will feature also in Gary's presentation. But you'll see the different kinds of uses that are going on with them. Pearl millet is kind of an interesting one. It's the most grown crop called millet internationally. Here it's mainly a forage crop, and it has some interesting uses in Canada even. But it's not that well often grown for food. There are some farms doing that. There's some growing of it for grain for animals, and then the rest of this we could come back to if you want to. So here's a question that we've had raised a lot. That people say, well, is sorghum a millet? I personally kind of say that it both is and isn't a millet. It allows us to discuss it in the broader context of quote unquote alternative grains. Dr. Brent Bean of Sorghum Chekhov offered a counterpoint, suggesting that it definitely isn't a millet. Certainly in the US, it is not discussed as a millet, but in India and in much of the rest of the world, it is. Of course, historically, it was considered in this category But the larger issue really is that millets is a constructed category that we use
hang that up
to
by some very visible.
to discuss mainly small grains that are less frequently cultivated. Sorghum's production, of course, dwarfs that of other millets, but in North America, its use as a food grain faces similar challenges. It's a very small percentage of the production, very small, that's actually going into food here. So I argue it's strategically useful to include it while acknowledging its unique aspects, but we don't have to belabor the point, and we just bring it in when it makes sense. So what's happening with proso millet? I'm going to go through several of the main ones on the previous list. We know it's a major crop in the Great Plains. There are some new varieties that have been developed, and Gary will touch on those. NAMA has a proposal for grain quality standards for proso. That's with the USDA. We'll learn more about where that is from Gary. We also assisted in, as we do with press articles when we have the chance, but there was a nice feature in Blue Dot Living on proso introducing a food-oriented audience to this grain. Coming back to sorghum for a moment, we are the largest producer in the U.S. It's only a tiny percentage goes for food, and the sorghum checkoff is working on that. They have quite a bit of resources which they're devoting to the crop in various ways. Pearl millet is we're getting more and more information. It's very interesting about its use for forage and learning about some farms that are growing it for food. They tend to be using varieties like TIF grain 102, or we're using it, that were designed originally for feed, but they also work as food products, although perhaps not ideally. There's a Canadian grain variety that's also being used, and that may be the only current North American variety that's being produced. The seed supplier for TIF grain 102 stopped last year, apparently. Foxtail millet, ongoing use as a cover crop, often in mixes. Of course, the heads are used, sold for bird seed as sprays, domestic birds. Internationally, that should be an I in there. China has come up with some very, very high yielding varieties, and at the same time, the grain is being promoted in parts of Africa where it was not a crop. Other millets were native to Africa and being grown there, but there's Chinese cooperation involved in that also. Japanese millet, forage mainly. I actually had tried to figure out if there were any grain varieties available with one outlet that was selling seed, but apparently there are no grain varieties grown for grain. They're grown for forage or grown sometimes even ornamentally. Billion-dollar grass, we don't often bring that into the millet space, but it is a close cousin of Echinocloa esculenta. It is a grain crop in South Asia and elsewhere in that continent. But here it's used, considered the USDA in one bulletin calls it an exceptional wildlife plant. So, and it's also used for erosion control, but it is grain bearing. Whoops. So finger millet, of all the widely grown millets internationally, it's the only one that's not grown at scale for any purpose in North America, which is a shame. We could go into the qualities that it has, but it eventually, I'm personally, I'm convinced it will be an important grain in the future. But have been research projects. There are ongoing ones. We had a webinar on it last May it was, and that was quite interesting. And we look forward to revisiting that topic. Teff is a forage grass. It's spread very widely. The whole history of teff is really quite remarkable if you consider that over 50 years it's come from nowhere to being a noted hay and forage crop, and the grain production is established mainly in the Northwest, but also elsewhere, including here in Michigan where I am. But a lot of the production is on contract, so it's uneven. So there's a whole marketing aspect to this, and Joni will get more into that. It really affects how some of these lesser grown crops are able to be produced. Brown top, quick mention, just mainly for wildlife, also for forage, the southeastern U.S. crop. Fonio, it's not produced here. I mention it because it's really another one that's come out of nowhere as an import. I knew it personally in West Africa many years ago, and I'm really pleased to see it's getting a lot more exposure. Interestingly, there are some craft brewers using it and are speaking very highly of it. So I'll leave it with that and pass it on to Gary and look forward to any questions towards the end of our webinar. Thanks.
All right, Don, okay, I'll let you, I'm Gary Wietgrefe, and I'm going to share screen. Oops, let me share that. Okay, get the right screen here. Oh, where's it at? Right there. All right, I'll do share screen. There we go. I'm Gary Wietgrefe. I'm part of the North American Millets Alliance, and I've been around millet fields for over 50 years, and it's a pleasure to work with Joni and Don on this project. I'm going to quickly review 2025 by type of millet, and then show you some of the outlook for 2026, which to me is extremely exciting. Don mentioned these topics as far as the main categories we're going to cover today, but this is a project from the North American Millets Alliance that we developed grain standards for Proso millet. The standards that were in existence dated from Minnesota Department of Ag 1954, and then a version in 1960, which was developed in Colorado, Denver Grain Exchange for birdseed, strictly for birdseed. And so that is back in the era where thresh machines were used, and certainly not the quality of grain that we have now. And so in order to have food grade millets separated from that used for, say, ethanol, poultry, food, birdseed, whatever, there needs to be grading standards, and those are developed and available. And anybody can use these, from farmer to processor can use them. And our hope is that eventually USDA will develop them, will adopt similar standards. But USDA hasn't adopted new grains for decades. So we hope Proso will be the first millet they'll have. We've had different agronomic seminars talking of Prosos, forage, feed, seed, and cover crops, wildlife. I mean, it's a number of topics we covered on the agronomic seminars this year. I'm going to now go through several maps by type of variety, but this is an overall glance at where millets are raised in the U.S. by state and by type of millet, and I'll break them down shortly. Brown top is the only millet in the U.S. that's raised on scale, primarily in the southeast of the United States, that is not recorded by USDA as a specific variety. It shows up under common millet, which I'll show you in a couple of slides. Proso millet by far is the largest grain acreage millet and the largest millet acreage in the U.S. Roughly 40-some% of the U.S. millet acreage reported by USDA is Proso. And the three primary states are 92% of the production is in Colorado, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And from an agronomic standpoint, I want to point out that only 1.2% is irrigated. You just don't irrigate Proso millet because it is so drought tolerant. And what's happened is Proso has been pushed to the western edge of the winter wheat belt by glyphosate tolerant crops. And when they entered the market, they gradually moved in, meaning soybeans and corn primarily, moved into what was traditional wheat country. And the tillage options were eliminated, and they just continuously crop now for the most part. And where there is need for fallow, that is usually where Proso millet has shown up on the very western edge of especially Nebraska and the northeast Colorado. But I do want to point out that 17% of the U.S. corn is irrigated, which is roughly 17 million acres. And so as water usage becomes a critical factor, not only in the U.S., but worldwide, the millets will find a place in that food and feed industry, as well as biofuels. Okay, common millet. This is a tricky one. USDA reports a category called common millet. Common millet basically is a catch-all for all millets planted, including brown top. And you'll see South Dakota accounts for 32% of all common millets. And it could be some legal issues that were brought up by USDA, suing farmers for misreporting crops and things like that. And I point this out because Proso is reported across the U.S. as Dove Proso, D-O-V-E Proso. That was a variety developed in Georgia in 1972. It's one variety of 100 or more varieties available in the U.S. And so it's technically illegal to report Proso as Dove Proso in the Dakotas, Nebraska, Colorado, because none of it's grown up here. And so I've worked with USDA to have them add Proso as a category by itself in 2026. Dove Proso will continue to be on there, and that should only pick up the Proso acres in the southeast part of the U.S. I also report counties. Keep in mind them counties, and I'm going to highlight that in a little bit. But here's Pearl, and notice again, 60% of the Pearl acres, most of it for forage, and 41% is irrigated. But you see the top three states, basically the center southern plains is where it's at, but any place with blue on the map produces a state that produces Proso millet, or excuse me, in this case, Pearl millet. Okay, foxtail millet, same way. 2/3 of the millet foxtail is produced in Montana, Nebraska, and South Dakota. But still, nationwide, it's produced in 121 counties, a lot of it. And what's unusual to me, looking at it as an agronomist, 13% is irrigated, and a lot of that is in Montana. And the reason they irrigate is to get short season annual crop forage, and they use river drainage water to irrigate some of that. Japanese millet is not a drought tolerant millet like the other millets. And so it tends to be a little bit to the eastern edge of the plain states. So Minnesota, South Dakota, and Nebraska account for 2/3 of the 99 counties in the U.S. that produce Japanese millet. And also I highlight irrigated because if you're going to plant forage, you need seed. And if you're going to plant the seed, you probably want to irrigate it to get a consistent yield for your seed delivery contracts. Teff, as Don pointed out, is an extremely interesting category of the millets. It's produced in 35 states. 37% is produced in Arizona, Nebraska, and South Dakota. But it's produced, according to USDA, in 378 counties across the U.S., and 61% is irrigated. 88% reported to USDA by farmers is reported for forage. So that does mean, Don, that 12% is raised for both seed and food uses, and there are the states. All millets category is summarized in the next two slides. Millets are produced in 44 states. Because Proso takes up such a large chunk of that total millet acreage, 71% again is produced in Colorado, Nebraska, and South Dakota. But just over 1,000 counties nationwide produce some type of millet, and it broke down almost exactly 50 point some percent versus 49.8% or something like that, forage versus grain and seed of all millets in the U.S. Here is the breakdown by county. The 25% of the counties in the U.S. that produce report some type of millet are in Georgia, Nebraska, and Kansas. What I think is interesting is Texas, South Dakota, Georgia, Nebraska, and Kansas. In those 5 states, 60 or more counties in each of those states produce millet. And that's why states like the Central Plains, Nebraska, Kansas, South Dakota, tend to produce lots of different kinds of millet. In fact, Nebraska, of the 6 different millets that are reported by USDA, Nebraska ranks in the top 3 in all 6. South Dakota ranks in the top, is 5 of the 6 millets. Pearl is the only one, but South Dakota is not in the top 3. Forage mixes. This is critical to think of millets as a forage mix. 43 million acres in the US are planted to mixed forages. Much of that includes a pound or 2 or 5 of millets, some type of millet in that mixed forage. But basically every state in the US produces a mixed forage for livestock feed. And cover crops, there's roughly 7 million acres reported by USDA in cover crops in the US. Virtually every state, again, uses cover crops. A millet, several different types of millets are used depending on the geography and the agronomics, and the use are planted to or added with a blend, usually sometimes 4, 5, 6, 10 different types of crops. And 2 or 3 millets are often added, especially during the summer blends in cover crops on those 7 million acres. Wildlife uses a couple 100,000 acres under USDA wildlife programs. The photo there is my grandson's farm with a millet bale that rather than harvesting proso, he has a rancher bale up a few bales, and then he sets it at the end of the shelter belt and the corn fields for winter forage for the pheasants. And there's, you can see the states again, a third of those wildlife acres reported in Missouri, Mississippi, and South Dakota. Summary, 2025, proso, you'll see the acres by type of millet, and I don't have to read through them, but I ranked them proso, and then the category common, which includes all the millets, pearl, teff, foxtail, Japanese, and brown top. Brown top is not reported. It's raised from basically Texas, around the Gulf, up to the Carolinas and Virginia. Primarily as wildlife. It's mixed in forages. It's mixed in cover crops, but mainly focused on wildlife. And then the seed producers that you'll find for brown top are also in the Southeast US. The bottom acres are USDA reported acres for 2025. Again, 35 million acres of mixed forages. I misquoted that earlier. It's 35 million acres mixed forages. Cover crops about 7, wildlife a couple hundred. And together with proso, they account for about 43 million acres. So on the left, I'm an agronomist, and on the left, you'll see a penny next to a proso millet seedling. That is how deep you should plant millet, and not any deeper. A penny depth, because millet is a very small seed, and it includes teff as either extremely small seed. It needs to be in that top half inch to an inch of soil. USDA, again, only reports about 10% of the acres in the actual millet category. The other 90% are mixed in with other forages. And primary reason why is that millet is it is not a program crop for USDA. And so National Ag Statistics only reports proso in 3 states, Colorado, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And Farm Service Agency reports the acreage by county, by different types of millets under their general program. And then there are other categories of obviously cover crops, mixed forages, and other. Again, water use, millets are the most drought tolerant crop and will work into any crop rotation in the US. Wherever there's a millet that you need for forage, seed, or feed or food, you can plant a millet into your rotations, whether you're in New York or Maine or Florida or Dakotas or Washington irrigating or dryland. Now, 90% of the millets used in the US actually go into, I would say it's closer to 80% of the millets in the US that are produced for grain and seed go into bird food. it's tens of millions of pounds. There's a processor here in South Dakota that packages about 1 million pounds a day of bird food. But what happened during COVID, it's the years, I'll just call it the COVID years, is when proso millet prices got so high that it basically forced it out of the bird food mix. And so bird food packagers started using crap like cracked corn, milo, and wheat into their bird food mixes. This is a picture from a grocery store of what they tried to sell for bird food. And if you're trying to raise squirrels or wild turkeys or blue jays or pigeons and attracting them, you would maybe choose this kind of crappy blend. But the bird food people realized their market crashed as far as total volume. It's $1 billion industry by trying to push this kind of thing into the old ladies that feed backyard birds, where the normal good quality wild bird food, which is most of the blend, wild bird food, should be about 85% proso with a mix of some foxtail in there to give it a red color, and then black oilseed sunflowers. So as they convert back, and they're starting to do that the last year and a half, back to using what they should, millets, in their bird food mixes, their sales are going to increase dramatically. Again, another outlook. I added this slide only today, or last night, this morning, because over the weekend I was pheasant hunting with some farmers, and it was, next to wheat fields or whatever. They're big rotation farmers, and one farmer told me, I can't keep losing money on wheat. And it doesn't matter if you're hard red winter wheat, hard red spring, durum, soft wheats, or white wheats. Any place in the U.S., you should be raising millet into your rotations and moving that into the food market. And what food processors are saying, we need large volume, consistent millet qualities. And with that, I'm introducing today the 2 focus millets of North American Millets Alliance on food grades. They're Dryland Genetics 317, which is a conventional proso millet, and then a waxy proso millet, which is a public variety developed by Nebraska. Here they are. On the upper left they called it the Goldie. You'll see DLG 317 variety. It has very, very favorable food qualities, not only the aroma, the taste, but also the bioflavonoids are an excellent millet. And that was released, I think, in 2024. And there's plenty of seed now available for 26 to plant it on a wide variety of acres. Going back to the food grade millets and the standards, if you want number 1 proso millet, you now have food grades. It has to be segregated and isolated from the field all the way to the food processor. And you can do that by taking a yellow endosperm, white millet, but yellow endosperm DLG 317, and move that all through the production chain into the food processors. Then on the lower right, I just pulled out Leon Krenzel's also produces and sells Plateau and Conditions, both for the food and the seed market. Plateau waxy millet, that again is a waxy millet that is excellent in the food chain. Now, it doesn't mean that these millets can't also be used for bird seed. If it's low quality, say it got rained on a lot and low test weight or something like that, you could move it into bird seed. But these two really need to be segregated all the way through the market for food. So in summary, there's some of my web links that you can go to. And Don didn't point this out, but I'm sure will later, that we are recording this, and North American Millets Alliance will have these slides and this presentation on YouTube. Don? Or Joni? Joni, you want to move on next?
Sure.
Yeah, I was supposed to moderate, but I missed on that one. So go ahead, Joni. Thanks.
All right. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Make sure I'm grabbing the right one. Okay. There we go. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Joni Kindwall-Moore. I'm one of the co-founders of North American Millets Alliance with Gary and Dawn. I also am the founder and principal at Snacktivist Foods, which is a food innovation company that works to develop innovation and value chains for millets and other opportunity crops. And I'm also newly the founder and CEO of the Rhizosphere, which is a B2B digital platform that is designed to bring together the diverse stakeholders across the food system so we can accelerate innovation and scale markets effectively. So I'm going to give you an overview of markets, millet markets of 2025, because it actually was a really interesting year. We had some great press around millets this year. A lot of action pertaining to sorghum, which I was really happy to see. I've long worked with Lanier and John Duff and many at the Sorghum Checkoff, and really trying to accelerate and support their work to drive sorghum adoption and innovation out in the market, including awareness. So this year, we also had an article, a couple of articles in the Capital Press. Matthew Weaver is here actually joining us today. Again, really trying to drive awareness, especially of that connection between the market and the supply side for millets in the Northwest. I'm based in Idaho, so Proso millet is a very important dry season summer fallow alternative for us. And then also, we had a cookbook come out, and I'm sorry, my dog decided to come down the stairs, so it's a little bit loud. Bear with me. Um, we had a team come out from a magazine called Home Cooked Magazine. It's a beautiful, high quality magazine that is designed to be issued quarterly and people collect. And ended up being the feature article in Home Cooked Magazine. It just came out this week. And sorghum is the star of the show. So, really great recipe for whole grain sorghum in that recipe, along with lamb, which is a really fun two kind of opportunity crops, one from the animal, one from the grain. And then Food and Wine just recently had an awesome article that really made some great traction. I've had a lot of people reach out to me about sorghum there. So again, building the momentum on the marketing side and the PR side is so critical for these crops because millets are confusing from a vernacular standpoint, and none of them have very alluring names. Like they do require a little more education. They don't have some of the appeal that some of the other names do. So we've really had to work a lot to develop that public image around them as superfoods and playing a valuable role in climate smart food systems. There's some great innovations happening as far as millets advancing into mainstream markets. In 2024, McDonald's announced their multi-grain millet buns. I don't eat at McDonald's, but if I were to eat at McDonald's, I would probably go for a millet bun. They're not available outside of India. I actually have not heard any sort of like long-term, success out of that program, but it's a global indication of awareness around crop diversity and grain diversity, which is exciting. Our top seller continues at Snacktivist continues to be our teff and proso millet waffle mix. We sell it coast to coast into food service and a little bit into CPG, not so much, but mostly food service. And it is just continuing to grow. There is continued interest in millet-based foods, which is really exciting to see. And then we've seen some other new snack innovations this year. Puffed popcorn alternatives making another go. There's been multiple iterations of these on the market over the years. Cobb happens to be endorsed by a celebrity athlete, so that always really helps drive that PR and adoption and get people excited about new things that they've never heard of, like sorghum. We also have made some great advancements in access to post-harvest handling and processing. The Civic Project in Montana is putting in their deholing facility, which will help elevate access to processing for proso millet and provide a Northern Rockies anchor for not only processing, but also vertical fill co-packing, which is really important for scaling the markets for proso millet. They'll also be processing buckwheat and some other gluten-free opportunity crops and alternative grains. We've continued to see some really interesting traction in social media. When I first started, promoting millets and sorghum on social media back in 2015, the stats on Instagram and Facebook were literally like non-existent. Now we're seeing, each year they are trending up significantly. India is really driving a lot of this, but it is actually rippling worldwide. And so we're seeing this huge uptick of people searching for millet, searching for sorghum, searching for teff, which is great because that's an indicator that consumer readiness is developing, especially in this next generation that doesn't buy the kind of the monocropping myth is what we kind of call it in the marketing world. Like there's this younger generation that wants to explore past the basic staples. But what's next? We need to take these ancient grains, millet, sorghum, teff, all of them from this specialty status to staple status, because that's when we can actually start to scale them cost effectively, get them into more and more products so that they become less premium niche and more desirable daily consumption items. And to me, that's really important. I am an RN. I was an RN and in the healthcare and health research sciences for 20 years. And the burden of diet-related disease is significant. It is one of the largest industries and the number one cause of death in North America and most of the world. And for us to adopt grains like sorghum, millet, all of the different millets is going to be really important for us combating diet-related disease as we advance. So this is a critical issue. It is not a niche interest. It is actually something that is obligatory for us, I believe, to truly succeed as a healthy human society. But we need infrastructure. Millet needs some coordination to scale the millet industry. So we have this consumer demand. It is growing. We now have this supply readiness, which we didn't see in the early years as much, at least for me as a value chain coordinator and as a purchaser. We're seeing that there's grading standards. Thank you, Gary and the NAMA team. We're starting to see this cohesion around germplasm and seed quality for culinary work. Thank you, Dryland Genetics. Thank you, Richardson Seeds and Mojo Seeds, all the different innovators out there that are working to really advance these crops so that they're appropriate for culinary application, that there's some understanding of how they behave and their carbohydrate chemistry. Will never advance into consistent scalable malting, consistent scalable flour alternatives, popping without that expertise when it comes to germplasm specificity. It's super important because I have been burned and I have made truckloads of product that did not turn out very well because the sorghum quality was so poor and where the truckload before was perfect. So it's just this inconsistency in quality that actually is a huge risk for people who are paying for those production runs, because I have myself eaten tens of thousands of dollars on poor quality runs that were literally because of poor quality germplasm way upstream. So again, working with agronomy support is another huge one too, and that's advancing. We're seeing more and more access to agronomists that have familiarity with these C4 warm season crops. So that's really helpful to farmers and helps increase not only the success and profitability, but also grading standard success. And ultimately at the end of the day, yes, human health, we need better quality carbohydrates, we need better quality foods, but farmers need more crop diversity. We need to have drought resilient, low chemical input requirement crops that can feed the world even in these really unsteady times. And then lastly, profitability. If farmers, like Gary mentioned, are losing money year after year on basic commodity crops, we have to have markets that support crop diversity and the diversity of the marketplace. So my most recent project is reflective of the pain I've experienced being an innovator in millets for the last decade, because honestly, at the end of the day, you just feel like you're a travel agent in 1985 every day. Like everything's analog. There's no visibility. There's no digitization. And it really hampers our ability to scale these important emerging crops. We also don't have live intelligence. We need a Bloomberg terminal for this long tail of the agri-food economy. And so my company, the Rhizosphere, we are an AI-enabled platform. We are a data intelligence infrastructure play, but we do provide a platform. That's like our starting point, is bringing people together and allowing this deep visibility so industries like millets can scale effectively. The Rhizosphere, I'll just give you a quick look because we're going to be launching a NAMA Rhizosphere community. It's one of our very first communities that will be going live in the Rhizosphere. But it'll allow us, and I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a kind of a pale picture there, but We provide virtual community hubs for communities of practice, for trade associations, for enterprises, where you can see your community, you can actually map it out and see where people are, and then you have a chat GPT type LLM bot, like a little bot that you can talk to and you can ask it all kinds of questions. So we're training that right now because we want our community, we want incoming innovators to come in and say, where can I buy food grade Proso millet? And it will say, here are the people who are providing it at the market side and on the ingredient side. Here are the people who are processing it. Here are the farmers who are growing it. Here are the university research programs that are developing and advancing it. Here are your agronomists. Here are your labs that test it. And you have a full comprehensive view of the ecosystem that is needed to accelerate market innovation. It's so important. And especially when we need to aggregate, we don't have any visibility to create digitized aggregation or like those types of digital scale. So we're building those tools into the rhizosphere. So we're really pleased with the work that this community here at NAMA is doing because this is an emerging market here in North America that needs this type of digitized coordination and intelligence. And it's a perfect example to advance something so important like our millet industry and show how proper and judicious use of technology can accelerate market adoption. So if you're interested in signing up, please go ahead and fill out a waitlist or just ping me. I can send you this link. And, again, the NAMA community is going to be one of our flagship communities in the rhizosphere. So please follow up if you have any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Joni. And thank you, Gary, also for these very informative presentations. We'll want to go into question and answer right now. And if I may, I'll start with one quick one. For Joni, a couple of years ago when we were talking about promoting millets, one of the issues that was brought up was how they tended to be promoted as gluten-free and low GI crops. And those are good features. I mean, there's nothing at all wrong with them, but it's tended to typecast them. Do you think the millets are
Yeah.
starting to move past that in North America?
Luckily, yes. I think that we are starting to shed that kind of obligatory use case. I can't tell you how many times I've offered somebody a millet-based product and they said, no, I'm not going to eat that because I'm not gluten-free. So we're actually at Snacktivist launching our first hybridized product. I should have mentioned that. It's not out in the public yet. We're just receiving the first pilot run like this week, but it is actually a hybridized product to break down that stereotype, Dawn. We are doing a durum wheat and a DNS, like spring wheat, regenerative wheat. Like we're doing a few different wheat trials, but we're blending it with sorghum flour, prosa millet, and garbanzo bean to represent a regenerative rotation that is appropriate for our bioregion. And showing that one product can actually elevate the market pull for all of those ingredients in one great product. So I think that we're going to need more hybrid programs like that are like, hey, let's talk about sorghum and millet, but let's blend it with wheat to break that stereotype that it's like gluten-free only or diabetes diet only, or, it's great. Those are additional features, but it's not obligatory to enjoy millets. Mm-hmm.
The floor is open. Well, if nobody just steps up, I'll ask another one. I was just wondering if, Gary, we're talking about where millets are grown. Do you see any potential for that pattern to change? I mean, we've seen the very unusual case of a pearl millet, the tropical millet from West Africa, being grown in Canada for various purposes, including in rotations with potatoes. But do you see proso millet spreading to other areas, or proso millet? Talking about typecasting, it is very drought tolerant, but it could also grow with some more level of great rainfall. Do you think there's going to be a change in the pattern?
Yes, and it's already occurred. In the case of proso, it's grown across the U.S. And as I mentioned, USDA reports Dove proso as the only proso that they even report, and that was developed in 1972 in Georgia. I mean, it's still a variety that's used for wild birds food down there, primarily, attracting doves and waterfowl. but Proso is really nationwide. To get even more specific, we're limited on foxtail expansion, both for the food and the seed standpoint. But wholesalers I've talked to in the last couple of weeks tell me that they're wanting foxtail seed producers in the Northern Plains to produce seed so they can meet their demand for foxtail millets, not only in the Plain States, but other places. Here's where the seed is produced. Another example is pearl millet came up. Pearl millet, we now know there's both forage and seed varieties available out of Ontario. Since we're North American Millets Alliance, I've talked to a wholesaler that has already looked at bringing those down for 2026 into the U.S. Also, a seed producer, hybrid pearl millet seed producer, was brought production into Nebraska last year rather than the south of Texas and Georgia. They brought it into Nebraska. Probably the best example, though, is teff. Teff, if you look at articles that were written 2 years ago, they'll say that Idaho is the #2 producer of teff in the world, behind what? Ethiopia. Okay. But now, when I report 2025, we find it's spread across the U.S., and the main production is both in Arizona, is in basically top three states, is Arizona, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And so there's an example where once seed became available, it's a beautiful short season forage, as are the millets, but it finds places where it is adapted to. And Japanese millet, for example, is limited by seed supply, but works perfect into rotations when you're adding it to a cover crop. We'll say in the eastern half of the Plain States into the Corn Belt, where they actually use rotations and want high quality forage. And that's also where pearl millet has come into the market for an excellent forage, recutting forage, raising it into the fall. So yes, Don, the millets are finding their way into all kinds of places. The Pacific Northwest, they struggle with their white wheats, finding something other than fallow to rotate. And by adding millets to that rotation, especially Proso, they can raise 2 crops every 3 years rather than 1 crop every other year, a crop that they're not making money on.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Yeah, there's a question that came up on the chat, and the chat has gone in various directions, but Dan Propst, who apparently hails from eastern South Dakota, asks if there are contracts available for the new millet varieties, the new Proso varieties.
There are for seed production. Are there for farmer grain production? And depending on the quantities that the grower wants to produce. If the grower's looking at producing, we'll say 200 acres or less, then you would actually go to a seed producer to produce that variety of millet, whether it be a foxtail, Japanese, whatever. But on Proso, basically, if farmers segregated the new Dryland Genetics 317 or the Waxies, they have to segregate it. Then we can go into the food industry and say, here's the growers, here's the distribution chain that can provide that quantity of millet. So yes, there are contracts for different millets, but different scales. So depending on the farm size.
Quickly, time frame as this develops, as this rolls out. I mean, it's immediate
for 2026. I've talked to producers and wholesalers already that are looking for seed production and quantities. And what happens when seed is not making germ? First, I mentioned foxtail. If foxtail millet doesn't make germ for seed purposes, it then goes into the wild bird food mix, or in some cases, cage bird food. So there are alternative uses, but that's a secondary, not a primary use for the high quality seed that they're producing.
David Brenner asks if he can get Goldie grain to try in his home kitchen. I guess that's the waxy one. No.
No. That is Dryland Genetics one.
Okay, sorry.
I only talked to Dr. Pat Schnabel with Dryland Genetics yesterday afternoon, and we discussed how that yellow endosperm, highly favorable aroma and bioflavonoids would work into the food industry. Where there is a small microprocessor, I am not sure, but I would suggest contacting Dryland Genetics. You go to the source, go to Dryland Genetics website, query them, and find out where they can get their millet hulled and available in the food chain. And perhaps there are food packagers already packaging it that I'm not aware of.
Thank you. Srikanth Panthulugiri asks, can you explain a brief about the potential areas of finger millet market segments in the U.S.? If it's okay, I'll handle this, and you can chime in, anybody afterwards. Personally, we've had some contact with, well, like one grower in particular who is trying to grow finger millet in California for the Indian American market out there. I think that's one immediate area, and that kind of mirrors what happened with teff in the early years. In the early years with teff, Wayne Carlson and then another gentleman shortly thereafter from Eritrea up in Minnesota, I apologize, I forget the name offhand, we're bringing it in to serve the Ethiopian American, Eritrean American communities, since Ethiopia was at that time prohibiting export of the grain. This is in the period of famines and difficult issues in the Horn of Africa. So that would be one area. I think in terms of marketing and longer terms, I personally think the taste profile is very interesting. It could be very interesting in certain kinds of sweetbreads and so on. It is also very high in calcium, and if we're talking about the potential for diet-based calcium consumption for people at risk of osteoporosis, also for growing children, you don't always necessarily have to go with dairy or kind of added calcium into other products, like your almond milks, for instance, I believe have calcium added to them. This is a natural feature. Finger millet is extraordinarily high in calcium. So that's my personal thought, but I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on.
Yeah, I'll just comment that Iowa state is developing finger millet varieties and has a huge selection process going on. And Don, didn't you also mention that there was some link there with Mississippi?
Yeah, Mississippi State has some work going on there. Of course, Georgia, University of Georgia earlier was doing the genetics of finger millet. There's been some tie-in with a research project that I think Cornell was heading in East Africa, but it's tricky how these things, international and domestic, play with each other. But yeah, there's different stuff, and we're going to try to do that in the coming year, is get more experts and discuss more widely these various things. So various different millets.
So finger millet is not produced on a commercial scale in the U.S., so I'm not familiar with it.
Not at all. It gets grown ornamentally, and that's about it. And then on research stations, I'm afraid that's about it. Matthew Weaver asks the supply-demand picture. What does that look like for food and seed? I guess does it cost the millets or
yes, if you're wanting food millets for 2026 processing early in 2026, go to Leon Kinsel Seed in western Nebraska and Dryland Genetics. Ask them for their source producers, because you have to go to the producer that has to have it segregated. The Dryland Genetics 317 or the Plateau, you have to have it segregated, and you go to the, if I was that person looking at a food industry use, I would go to the seed producers that are supplying the seed. And for example, Dryland Genetics has the exclusive rights to their seed, and you have to go into the market. You can't reuse that, whether you're a farmer or a farmer wanting to sell others. You can't reuse that Dryland Genetics varieties in any other way except putting it on the market. Only Dryland Genetics produces the seed sources, and they know the farmers that are producing it.
Part of it I read in this question is a little bit of the, Matthew, you can clarify if I'm off the mark here, but it's sort of a supply-demand econ thing.
Okay,
which is going to drive which?
Okay, in the case of Proso, there's enough varieties available, both conventional as well as the food grades, to meet any expected demand for 2026 production into 27. Okay, these varieties are produced now at scale. What's limiting seed production in 2000 millets in 2026 are especially the foxtail, the Japanese, the teff, and pearl. We need significant increase in seed production in 2026 to meet the demand for 27.
Okay. Let's see what else we got. Anybody else have any questions? We have the floor is open. You can speak up. We've been running off the chat, which is fine, but if anybody has any clarifications, ideas, suggestions.
Just want to say a quick thank you to NAMA team for putting together this. It's been, I've been quietly watching from the sidelines, and what a great volume of work done by all of you over the last few years. So I can imagine the amount of work that went into this. So kudos and congratulations.
Thank you.
A couple comments and a question. I think the finger millet question came up. There was a producer in Manitoba that was producing finger millet when I was looking into it at least 2 years ago. So I don't know what the status is today, but I believe it was also for bird seed applications at that time. But it was food grade. I guess I didn't think there was much difference between the standard needed for seed or grain. It was just it's very versatile. So that's one. And Joni, thank you for your work on product innovation, and really good point that you mentioned about how consumers kind of shy away when they hear it's gluten-free. So,
Yeah.
in our marketing messages, I'm also realizing that maybe it's not the key factor that should be highlighted, and like that blending with other flours and just promoting it as an overall healthy product seems to be where my head's at too in terms of kind of promoting this. And I recently heard about this work that was done in terms of consumer perception. Just this is a research that was kind of done to explore how people, or I guess around the storytelling for products, just carrots. We're not even talking anything complex. Carrots that were served in food service establishment, three different, they're produced the same way, same ingredients, but they changed the positioning in three different ways and to understand how people choose it. One was like they called it really this gourmet rosemary infused carrot. And then the other one was low sodium, low fat something carrot. And then the other one was like, just roasted carrots. Guess what people chose? Most people chose the one that sounded like gourmet and rosemary infused, and like that's what people went for. And didn't,
Yep.
yeah, very few people went for the low. So even though in a sense all three was the same, there was no change whatsoever. So
That's valuable
That's
insight.
interesting. Yeah.
Can you share that with me, Sujala?
sure,
Do you have an access to that article?
I need to dig in. So I heard this actually at a Stanford event about the researcher producing this result. So I'll ask the person who spoke for the results. So they
Love
were,
that.
I guess they were looking at understanding how people choose products to increase
Yeah.
plant-based adoption. So this was one of the observations.
So
And it's very true. People want to eat what tastes good and not necessarily what's good for them. I mean, it's nice when they
Right.
coincide, but there's the
Yeah.
long stories about different things we won't get into. We're
It's
actually running out of time. Thank you.
yeah,
Sujala, by the way, for those who aren't familiar, had a very interesting millet milk product in Canada. I
amazing.
think that's off the market right now, but we're looking forward to what you're doing, and thanks for joining us again.
Don, I did want to answer your question. I'm aware of, not aware of finger millets being produced in Manitoba, but the largest processor of varieties of millet in Canada was actually a red cerise millet into the food business. And unfortunately, he passed away. The Millet King in Manitoba passed away this
Oh,
year.
he did. Oh,
So,
The
So
person I was talking about. Oh, I
yes,
Yeah.
and so that was primarily cerise red pro. So although there are large quantities of red cerise still produced in Manitoba and Saskatchewan.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. Any last words before we head out? I want to really thank everybody for joining us. We will continue the dialogue in 2026 to be sure.
I do want to mention, Don, that these will be available on North American Millets Alliance YouTube website. So please, if you want to review this or share it with other people within a few days, it will be on YouTube as well as our other webinars. So please look there for reviewing the data that was presented today.
Yeah, I'll put that in the chat before we get off here.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's but yeah, it's basically Millets Alliance at Millets Alliance under YouTube. Very simple.
Okay. Perfect.
Millets
Yeah.
plural. All right. Thank you, Joni. Thank you, Gary. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great day. Eat more millets.
There you go.
Everyone.
See you all later.
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.